Today's topic is about a particular practice within Islam that is incredibly crucial to the Islamic faith and to the Islamic practice. And this practice is known as enjoining what is good and forbidding what is evil. In Arabic, it is known as al-amr bil maruf wa nahi anil munkar. And essentially, the importance of this particular type of practice is said to be so important that without it, a person who happens to be Muslim could become, can lose their faith if they do not practice enjoining what is good and forbidding what is evil. For this reason, I think it's important to discuss what it ultimately means for a Muslim and how best to put it into practice. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. We see in chapter 3 of the Quran, verse 104, the Quran making reference to this term or to this practice. And it says, "And from among you there should be a party who invite to good and enjoin what is right and forbid the wrong. And these it is that shall be successful. You are the best nation ever brought forth to men, bidding to honor and forbidding dishonor, and believing in Allah." These two verses reference the idea of it being the most honorable thing to do, right? That the nation, the Islamic Ummah, that their honor, that their excellence, right, is rooted in bidding to honor and forbidding dishonor, right? Enjoining what is good and forbidding that which is evil, right? It's an honorable practice. Now, we have a tradition from the Messenger of Allah in which he says that in describing the value of this practice, he says, to prevent a Muslim from doing an unlawful action is equivalent with Allah to the performance of 70 accepted Hajj. Now, for those of you who may not be Muslim, who might be looking into Islam and might be watching this, know that Hajj really is a very important obligation. In fact, they say that if a person is lucky enough to perform the Hajj or the pilgrimage to Mecca, even if once in their lifetime, and it is accepted, then what happens is the person's soul becomes wiped clean of all sins. So the Prophet is saying here that someone who is involved in this practice of enjoining what is good and forbidding what is evil, should they accomplish the act of preventing a Muslim by doing this practice from committing some harm, right, some wrongdoing, that action, right, is in the eyes of Allah more pious, right, or as pious as someone going to Hajj and their Hajj being accepted. This is the weight and the importance of enjoining what is good and forbidding what is evil. One of the successors of the Prophet Muhammad, his name is Imam Jafar Sadiq, he says that the totality of all good deeds, including even the struggle of armed jihad or armed conflict in the way of Allah, compared with enjoining the right and forbidding the wrong, is like a small amount of saliva compared with a deep ocean. Right? It says, so he's stacking all good deeds together, right, on one side, and he says, compared to this practice of enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong within the community, he says that all good deeds done is like a little bit of saliva. It's very small when compared to this this action, which is equal to that of all of an ocean. So this is the comparison, right? It's almost as if there's really no comparison. And the Holy Prophet, in another hadith, he says, the one who sees a wrong action done should prohibit it by his action, if he's able to. And if he is not able to, then he should prohibit it by his tongue. But if he is not able even to do that, he may forbid it in his heart. And this is a very powerful hadith because it speaks to the various opportunities that we may not, as individuals within society, as members of society, as citizens of society, may not always have the opportunity to stop some action, some bad or evil from happening. We may not be capable enough. We may not have the enough resources to do it. We may not be able to react quick or fast enough. But the Prophet says, well, even if you're not able to do that, there are still stages to which you have to resort to. That if you cannot prevent some evil happening within your community, your household, amongst your family and friends, within your nation state, then the next step after that is you can speak out about it. You can protest. You can write about it. You can post something on social media about it, right? You can verbally express your discontent for that particular evil or wrongdoing. And he says that if you're not in the position to even do that, because sometimes you may be a public member, right? To which if you voice your opinion on that particular issue, it can be such a divisive issue that it can cost you your employment or promotion or something that could be a source of harm for you that you may not be at that particular time ready to suffer those consequences. He says that even if you can't do the former two things, either of preventing that action or speaking against that evil, then you should, at least in your heart, not accept it, right? And a classic case of this is, we have a lot of exposure to social platforms. Just as an example, Netflix or Apple TV or whatever other media form there may be, that one might be exposed to a lot of violence in the entertainment industry, in the movie industry, in the film industry, where you're exposed to a lot of violence, a lot of sexual nudity, or a lot of things that are happening to a lot of images and stories that are taking place and that they're showing us as a form of cultural indoctrination, right? It may not be the intent of the director, but if you're exposed to these types of movies, images, stories, and are inundated by them, they over time will start to change the way you think and feel about those particular issues. And at that level is where you start to see the person changing and accepting certain things because they're constantly being exposed to them, these images and these storylines. And so over time, the person can start to accept this way of being in their heart, right? Their minds and their feelings starts to change about a particular way of seeing and feeling about a thing, and it becomes less and less Islamic. So at the level of the heart, the Prophet is saying that if you're exposed to evil, whatever form it may come in, right? It can even come, like I said, in the form of a movie, a television series, etc., that may serve, even though the intention may not be behind that TV show or that movie or that film with that purpose. It may not be made with that purpose. It can still influence us in a negative way. And the Prophet said that when that happens, you should at least in your heart be averse nonetheless to that, to not accept that in your heart, to not allow it to shape and influence the way you think about things. This, of course, is not to say that they may not be some positive influence from watching a movie or a documentary series or a TV series. It may be a very positive experience, and of course one should not be averse to anything good. But where there is a negative impact and a negative portrayal of certain things in these media forms, we need to be very careful. Again, another hadith from the Messenger of Allah in which he says, whosoever my ummah or my community, the community of Muslim believers, whosoever of my ummah undertake to enjoin right and forbid evil and associate in establishing benevolence, they live happily and prosperously. But when they stop doing so, the blessings will be removed from them. And this is an important piece of information for us as Muslims and even non-Muslims to be aware of, because this happens whether one is Muslim or not, right? That every community, whether they're Christian, Jewish, or even people who are may not be necessarily believers, they may still be oriented towards justice, equality, fairness, truth, right? And because they're oriented to these types of things by nature, they would naturally respond towards the good, towards the doing of the good. Of course, a democratic society functions like this to a certain limit. It has its limitation. Islam takes it a bit further. Whereas, for example, in a democratic society, the focus is on the rights of an individual, right? As long as the individual doesn't cause any harm to themselves or to others, then they're free to do what they want to do. In an Islamic society, although we don't see a conflict between the rights of an individual versus the responsibility and duty a person has, it is still important for us as Muslims to acknowledge that even though an individual may have a right to do something, they don't have a right to spiritually harm the community. And this is something that a democratic society is not necessarily aware of, or simply doesn't take account of. The scope of a democratic society is materialistic, as long as that there's no materialistic physical harm that involves that comes from that action, then the action is considered okay to do. In Islamic society, that's not the case. We believe that every action has both a phenomenal physical reaction or outcome, but also as well as spiritual outcome. And so even when there is no physical harm to a person or another person within society, it can still be a source of harm spiritually for the community. And so the idea of enjoining what is right and forbidding what is evil goes beyond just justice. It goes beyond just rights, fairness. It includes also that which is displeasing to God, right? That which results in a spiritual harm to the community, as well as a spiritual harm for the individual as well. So the Prophet says that what happens is that spiritually, the spiritual blessings that permeate a community will be ultimately be endangered of being removed by God. And this is very important because when that happens, the prayer of the people, even the good people within that society, is no longer answered. We have this hadith that speaks to this, and this hadith is from one of the successors of the Prophet Muhammad. His name is Imam Ali al-Islam, and he says, "Do not give up bidding for the good and forbidden from evil, lest the mischievous gain positions over you. And then in that case, when you pray, your invocations will not be granted to you." And so this touches on the point that I was just referring to. So the dangers of good people not acting, not fighting against evil, not being responsible in that practice, and not enjoining what is right, not standing up for what is right. That what happens is that over time, certainly at a societal level, is that wicked people gain positions of power and authority. And when that happens to the point where they start to gain authority over good people, and they start to supplant evil, the good, in preference to what is evil and what is unjust, the prayers of the good people within that society is no longer answered. And that's why it's important as Muslims and as people in general, as members of society, as conscientious and good-minded and good-hearted people within society, right? Even if you're not a believer, it's important that that we stand up, right, towards injustice, towards evil, towards untruth, towards anything that poses a threat and harm to the well-being of the community. And of course, if you're religious, i.e. Muslim, even more responsibility, because this responsibility has consequences beyond just this world, and to the point where it impacts the prayer of ourselves and our children. The Holy Prophet himself said, "He who enjoins right or good and prohibits wrong or evil is the vicegerent of both Allah and His Messenger on the earth. So in the Islamic teachings, the Quranic teachings, humanity was created as the vicegerent of God, or the representative of God on earth. And the representative of God, this position, what's integral to this position is actually enjoining what is good and fighting against that which is evil. This is an attribute of the representative of God. This is what it means to be truly human. In the Quran, chapter 9, verse 67, God says, the hypocritical men and the hypocritical women are alike. They enjoin evil and forbid good, and withhold their hands, meaning from charity. They have forsaken Allah, so He has forsaken them. Surely the hypocrites are the transgressors. So in this verse, God is saying that the people who are essentially dubbed by the Quran as hypocrites, right? Evil men and women. God says that the way they operate is that they naturally, on account of their evilness, they actually do the opposite, right? Of enjoining what's good and forbidding what's evil. They actually enjoin what is bad and what is evil, right? In preference to the good, right? They hate the good, right? And furthermore, they withhold their hands, meaning that they refuse to do charity, to be of any good to humanity. And God says that He has forsaken them as a result of that. In chapter 9, verse 71, Allah says, and as for the believing men and the believing women, they are guardians of each other. They enjoin good and forbid evil, and keep up prayer and pay the poor rate, or pay the alms or the tax, or they do charity, and obey Allah and His Messenger. As for these, Allah will show them mercy. Surely Allah is mighty, the wise. And in this verse, we see that that God is saying that what it means to be a believer is that the believer are those who are guardians of each other. And as I was saying earlier on in the video, I was saying that yes, in an individualistic society, the law is preoccupied with the right of the individual, whereas in God's law and in God's religion, it's not only preoccupied with the rights and obligations of the individual, but it is also preoccupied with safeguarding each other's spiritual well-being, right? And of course, there's a direct link between societal well-being and spiritual well-being, right? This is why the Quran says that the believer they are guardians of each other. In what sense here? Certainly not in the physiological sense, certainly not in the societal sense only, but also extending beyond the societal sense, in that they are looking out for each other's spiritual well-being. This is what it really means, right? They are guardians for each other, such that they are mindful to correct each other or to speak out against some injustice within society, regardless of what level that's happened, whether it's within the family, within that's happening locally, within a community. And so we are, regardless of at what level we're practicing enjoining what is good and forbidding what's evil, it's a form of guardianship, right? It's a duty and responsibility that we have to our fellow Muslim believer as well as our fellow human being. Because in Islam, there is a tradition that says that from Imam Ali al-Islam, one of the successors of the Prophet, he said that Muslims are brothers to other human beings in either the form of religion or in the form of humanity. So even if you're not a person's brother in terms of them being a fellow Muslim, that you are still their brother in terms of the fact that in terms of your humanity, that's what you share with them. And you should never compromise that, right? Or you should never treat them in a way that harms their humanity, right? There is that affinity that you share with them, and you should honor and respect that in them. We have a verse within the Quran, chapter 31, verse 17, in which Luqman says to his son, "O my son, keep up prayer and enjoin the good and forbid the evil, and bear patiently that which befalls you. Surely these acts require courage." This is an interesting verse because it speaks to a couple of things. One is that there's a link between prayer and enjoining what is good. And Hadiths have said quite clearly that when the practice of enjoining what is good disintegrates and bad people rise into positions of authority and supplant the good as a result of that, what starts to happen, as I said earlier on, is that the prayer then becomes undermined, such that when you invoke in your prayer to Allah, no matter how good you think you may be, right, God will no longer answer your prayer. Because those people who consider themselves good in society, religious as they may be, they didn't take up the responsibility of fighting against that which is evil and in trying to enjoin what is right and what is good. And so their prayers becomes null and void after. So there is that connection between the salat or the prayer and the responsibility and the practice of enjoining what is good and forbidding what is evil. Another thing that Luqman al-Islam says is that he says that yes, enjoining what is good and forbidding what is evil, it's not something that is easy. It takes courage, right? It takes great confidence and bravery. But we later hear in the Hadiths that this is something that we have to do and we should not shun away from. Now, of course, Luqman is a sage within a sage or a man of great wisdom within the Quran, and this is just some advice he's passing to his son. Now, one of the rightful successors of the Prophet, Imam Ali, he says, "One who refrains from resisting evil by means of his heart, hand and tongue is like a dead amongst the living." So here the Imam is saying that if you don't, at any level, at the level of taking action, okay, let's say you're not able to take action against some evil or wrongdoing, at the level of speaking out or voicing your some expression regarding that injustice or that evil or that wrongdoing, or even if you're not able to do that, but even in your heart you're not you're not affected by that. It doesn't bother you, right? That you're not distressed by it. It doesn't anger you, it doesn't frustrate you. And the Imam says then that you're spiritually dead. And that's a condition that he describes as, being dead amongst the living. Like, that's a spiritual condition. And that's not a good condition to be in. There is a story from the Hadiths in which it is said that God wanted to destroy the city, and he sent 2 angels to execute the destruction of the city. Now, when the angels got there, they saw a man, a believer, who was supplicating to God, who was praying to God. And one of the angels was concerned by this, because he said to the other angel, he said, this person is a believer and he's in prayer supplicating to God. Should we save him from this destruction? Now, he said to the angel, he says, don't you see this person supplicating? The other angels replied, yes, I do, but God's order has to be executed. And he says, well, wait, let me ask God as to what should be done. And he turned and he prayed to God. He said, oh Allah, in this city there is a person who entreats and beseeches you. Do we still impose punishment upon the city? And God responded by saying, execute the command which has been given you, for that person has never been perturbed or distressed for my sake, nor did he show anger over the evil deeds committed by the other people within the city. Now, this story is a reminder to all of us, right? Even people who live in non-Muslim countries or Muslim countries, that when we see evil or injustice taking place, we have a responsibility as an individual and as a member of society to speak out against it, because in the end, our prayers become, like I said, undermined. And while we may think that we are religious and are believers and are in the right in God's eyes and are safe from God's wrath and anger, this may not necessarily be the case. One of the rightful successors of the Prophet, Imam Jafar Sadiq, he says, when innovations, right, manifest themselves amongst the people, in other words, when things that have nothing to do with Islam, the actual teachings, laws, tenets, and creed of Islam, when it starts to filter into an Islamic society, any evil that infiltrate into society, whether it's Islamic or un-Islamic, he says that it is imperative for the elders and leaders of that society, or in general, people of knowledge, people who are learned, whether that's learned through an institution or self-taught. He says that it is imperative for them to manifest what they know, right? So that people may refrain from evil. And if they fail to do so, God will take away from them the light of faith. Once again, we have this same refrain that when good people, when wise people, when people who know better within society fail to act when they see some wrongdoing or some evil infiltrating society, that their failure have a consequence, a divine consequence. And of course, when it comes to spirituality, God will take away the light of faith from them, be they Muslim, Christian, or Jewish. Now, the successor of the Prophet, Imam Ali, he says that the Messenger of Allah ordered us to face up to avowed sinners through expressing our disapproval of their wrongdoings. And I mean, it doesn't get any clearer than this. So, in other words, the Prophet has urged his successors, his community, to no matter what the cost, that they should try to fight against injustice or those who represent evil within society. Now, there's some mixed messages because the Hadiths give this clear impression that we should face up, right? That we should stand against avowed sinners, right? But when we look at the necessary conditions for enjoining good and forbidding evil, this is not necessarily without condition. And we will get to that in just a moment. However, the first condition for us to perform good and to perform the task of enjoining what is good and forbidding what is evil is that it is said that the person who is doing so must have some general knowledge about what is good and what is evil. This is the first necessary condition. And it is said that the person doesn't need necessarily to be a scholar. They could have general knowledge, okay? General knowledge is sufficient. Another necessary condition in order to perform doing good and forbidden evil is that there must be a sense that one's advice or one's doing this will be heeded. Conversely, there is no point in trying to guide those whom you know will not take your advice. Another condition is that you must be certain that the person that you're trying to counsel to do good is intent on doing evil. And that there is some chance that they may change their position. And in that case, yes, it's good to counsel them. In the event that the person has done the action, it is good that to practice giving them good advice, right? As a way to prevent them from continuing to do the haram or that which is forbidden, right? And this other condition is that in enjoining what is good and forbidden what is evil, there needs to be no fear of harm, right? And what this basically means is that when one knows or fears that doing this practice has a considerable harm in it for oneself, one's goods, one's property, or even to some of the believers, it is not obligatory. And this is why if you read the Hadiths, it may give you the impression that you have this obligation and it must be practiced at all times, no matter what the conditions. However, the scholars have said that no, there are conditions here. There are certain necessary conditions. The only time when danger cannot be avoided and it is obligatory for a Muslim believer to enjoin what is good and forbid what is wrong is when the religion itself is in danger, its laws, its tenets, the Quran, as well as the independence of an Islamic state is being undermined or is in danger, then a Muslim is obligated without regards to any potential danger that may lie in as a consequence for them. Imam Ali al-Islam says, ask others to do good, you will also be included among the good doers. To discourage others from evil with your actions, as well as your speech, and stay away, to the best of your ability, from he who commits it. Struggle for Allah as is his due, and the reviling of a reviler should not deter you in matters of Allah. Leap into danger for the sake of right, wherever it may be. So this hadith, in spite of the necessary conditions, say, hey, listen, if you want to take it upon yourself as an individual to not allow any dangers, any harms, any threats to deter you, the hadith says this is your right. You don't need to be afraid of that, right? Do it for the sake of Allah. Don't let anything deter you. And you do have that option, right? And in fact, this is the nobler action to take, right? Regardless of the harms and dangers, to forge ahead in doing good. The Imam Ali as well says that the firmness of the religion of Islam is due to enjoining what is good and forbidding what is wrong, and observing the limits set by Allah. And this is an interesting hadith because it's trying to show us that unless we do this act of enjoining what is good and forbidding what is evil, over time what tends to happen is there becomes a loosening or a slackening within the society, in which you start to see all sorts of evil infiltrate the society, right? So he's saying here the firmness of what it means to be a moral and upright society, and a society that the Quran says is one of honor, is that this needs to be in place, this action, both on the individual level and at the collective level. As a society, we need to take this on. Another rightful successor of the Prophet, Imam Jafar Sadiq, he says, woe to the people who do not support the religion of Allah by enjoining good and forbidding evil. Now, this, of course, is a very familiar refrain, and it refers back again to what happens when a people give up this particular practice of enjoining good and forbidding evil, standing up to evil, right? In seeking to establish the good. He says, woe to that type of society, woe to their members, woe to the good people, right? Especially the religious-minded people. And this is a duty of all religious people and of all people in general, regardless of whether they believe in God or not, because people still believe in the elements of truth, the elements of justice, the elements of equality, the elements of fairness, right? The element of goodness. These are attributes and elements of our humanity. And so we must seek to preserve these elements within society. And once those elements are lost, then the Imam says that woe to those people who allow this to happen. It becomes problematic at a societal level, but also at a spiritual level. There's tremendous spiritual consequence for this, and it is not good. Thank you, and Assalamu alaikum.